What's up, friends? I got a fun video for you today. So Logitech reached out and asked if they could sponsor a video to show you guys this. This is the new Mevo Core, and this adds a whole new way of doing professional live streaming that's completely wireless, all from this little camera box. Now this thing looks pretty darn cool, and one of the big features of this camera is the fact that it has a micro four thirds sensor in it. So with this, you can attach micro four thirds lenses, which is pretty cool because there's tons of different lens options for this. Now there's a ton of different ways to do live streaming, but very few ways to do it easily, especially when you're doing wireless multicam live streaming. So Logitech's trying to solve this problem with this Mevo ecosystem. And I made a video last year showing you guys how to use Mevo Go, and that was multicam live streaming from your phone. But this takes things to a whole new level because now you've got interchangeable lens cameras that are specifically designed for wireless multicam live streaming. Now, the thing that makes the Mevo Core camera super unique over any other mirrorless camera or webcams is the fact that you can set these up totally wireless. So these things have a battery built into them. You can control them from an iPad using the Mevo Multicam app. And I already know there's gonna be a bunch of people in the comments saying, well, I can already use my mirrorless camera or my webcam. Why would I need this? And that's fine. If it works for you, that's cool, but it won't be fully wireless. You're still gonna need to use an HDMI capture card or plug it in via USB. And so you're gonna have a lot harder time doing multicam streaming that way as well. You're gonna have a million cables and cameras set up. With this, they're all wireless and you just control them from an iPad. So I actually wanna switch over to one of these cameras to show you what this looks like in a talking head situation. And I'll run through everything, show you how to set them up for multicam live streaming. All right, so I'm switched over to the Mevo Core right now. You can see what this looks like. I'm using the Lumix 9mm f1.7, so it's way wider than the lens I was last using, but I think it's kind of cool for this type of an angle. Now, I've got everything controlled through the iPad right now because the only way to control this camera is with the iPad. Now, Logitech did send over some lenses here, so they sent me the 45 to 175. This is a pretty massive zoom, but it is power zoom. And then they also sent me the 14 to 42. So this lens is gonna be more kind of your standard zoom, which is what I typically use. And I will set this up as an overhead camera once I show you guys how to hook this up. Now this is a 4K camera, as I mentioned, but you're only gonna be live streaming in 1080p, and I don't think there are any other sites out there that let you stream 4K anyway. So the nice thing is you can record the 4K high resolution image on the camera and use that later if you wanna edit your podcast or your video later with the multicam setup. But for now, you're streaming 1080p and you're getting a 1080p file right to the iPad. So going over the whole camera here, like I said, it has a micro four thirds sensor, which uses micro four thirds lenses. It's got a nice boxy design with quarter 20 mounts around the entire camera, so you can basically mount it anywhere. It has a built-in mic, built-in battery with 6 hours of battery life, USB power in for charging, and USB pass-through. It's got a 3.5mm mic input, and then when you flip the flap down, it's got HDMI out for a clean 4K signal, as well as a micro SD slot for recording internal 4K video. So since I already added this camera to the app, I'm gonna show you how to add this camera as well. Same steps for every single camera you're gonna be adding. So we're gonna hold down the power button here. You hear a beep, and then you'll see a white light come on the front there. And when that white light switches to blue, that's when we can add this to the app. So we're gonna go to the blue plus icon here. We're gonna go up to camera, and then it's gonna tell you when it finds that camera. Right now it sees our 9J24M, which is a camera we're recording with right now. This new one just popped up, 6L8TX. And once this camera is ready, you can see the blue lights on here. This should be ready to actually connect. So we go to setup, we're gonna go to connect to the internet. You see the green light came on there. It's telling you now it's connected to the app. Well, we have to update the firmware on this, so we'll update the firmware on that. All right, so just finished the firmware update. We're gonna go to connect here. And now we've got our second camera angle. So we'll hit continue, and you can see we've got our main cam and then our second camera here lined up. I'm going to maybe hook it up here so we can do some top-down stuff and see how that looks. All right, so I have the overhead cam set up now so I can show you what it's like to switch cameras. Right now we're on the main camera, but all you have to do is tap on the other camera and it's gonna switch to that. Over on the right-hand side here, you can see that's gonna be your feed and what's gonna be sent out to the stream or what's gonna actually be recorded to the iPad. So if I just tap that, it switches back to the other camera. Tap that, switches back to the other camera. Super straightforward, same as what I showed in Mevo Go. Now down here on our bottom right, we have all our audio levels, and right now you can see these are the audio levels coming in from the camera, and that's just the built-in mics on these cameras. Now, if you want to hear what that sounds like, I'll switch over right now. This is what the built-in mic sounds like. It does have a 3 mic array on the top of the camera. It sounds okay, but I think that most people are going to want to run like a lav into it or like another mic that they'd be using on their desk, and that probably will sound the best versus something like this. Now, obviously, if you want to live stream, you go to live up here. And then right now I have my Twitch account set up, but you can set up YouTube, Facebook, X, Twitch, basically anywhere you can live stream, you can set that up here. And you go into your stream settings here, set that up. I'm not gonna go through that because it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to get yourself set up in streaming. That's the best part about the system. But the main thing I wanna show is image control. So we're gonna go in here, we're gonna go to image control, and this is where you control all the settings for your cameras. Now, our first option is focus. And as you can see, we've got focus peaking turned on here. We can actually turn that off. Only the user is gonna see that. The viewer will not see that. So it's just for you to see what's in focus. So you can turn that on and off. I've got it set to red right now. I like having it on because it's just a bit easier to see on this little window here what's in focus. But basically you can manually focus it by sliding it like this. But if you wanna focus on anything, you just double tap on it. So I'm gonna hold something like this up like a lens, and I'm gonna double tap on it. And you can see here, it's gonna focus on it, and now it's locked onto the lens. And then when you wanna go back to the other scene, like the iPad here, we just double click on the iPad. And then the same goes for any other alternate camera that you're using. So I switched back to the main camera because I feel like this is a more unique image to look at. So I'm gonna turn off focus peaking just to make things easier here. So we have our aperture control. So if you wanna stop the lens down or open it up, this is for more advanced users. If you don't know a lot about cameras, the aperture is what lets light into the camera through the lens. And so right now it's set to f2.5, but if you wanted to lower that down a bit, say you're in a really bright scene or you want to show more in focus, we can slide this and it'll stop the lens down. So now we're at f5, you can see it's a little bit too dark. So I'm gonna go back to f2.5, which was kind of the sweet spot for this setup. Then we have our zoom options here, which isn't available on this lens because this lens doesn't have zoom. So I'm going to switch over to the overhead camera because it does have a power zoom lens. So when you go to zoom here, you can see we have our zoom options. So if you want to zoom out, we can go this way. If you want to zoom in, we can slide it this way. And this is only going to work on lenses that have power zoom. I'm going to go back to the main camera here, image control, and moseying right along here, we got exposure control. Now you can set this to full auto and not even worry about it, but because I'm a camera guy, I like to manually control my settings. So right now we're in 30 frames per second, so our shutter needs to be double our shutter speed, so we're at 1/60th of a second. And then right now I have the ISO set to 200. Now you can see you go down to 100. This will give you the cleanest image, but it's a little bit too dark in here. And you can go all the way up to 6400 ISO, which it's nuclear, so we don't want to go there. But I think the sweet spot's probably between 100 and 800 ISO. And I'm gonna just leave it at 200 ISO because that's what looks best for this scenario. So we got our white balance options in here. 4000 Kelvin is the perfect white balance for this, but you could set it to auto and not worry about it and just let it do its own thing. The only thing is, if you have any fluctuation in light, like if I was to put my hand up to the camera and it got a little bit brighter, it might switch the white balance. So it's best to just leave it locked off at something that you think or know matches the scene that you're actually using. Brightness here, we're not gonna touch this. This is kind of your exposure compensation. If you're using auto white balance, auto exposure and everything, this will set the lighting for that. And then of course you've got all your settings in here. You can format the SD card. You can set a password to connect to the camera. You've got your NDI modes. I'm not gonna be doing that. That's basically your network. If you wanna use this as a webcam, you can set it up that way through the network. Then of course you've got your tally lights. So you've got a front tally light and a back tally light. When you're recording or on the main camera, it's actually red. So if I was to switch cameras to this camera, that red light would actually turn off on this camera and then it would go red on that one, even though they're both still recording internally. So I know that's a lot of settings and most of you will probably just leave it in auto, but the awesome thing is you have full manual control over these cameras, which is awesome. So yeah, it's super straightforward. Tap that to switch to that camera, tap that to switch to that camera. And again, as I mentioned, you can do your live streaming the exact same way you are here. Right now we're recording into the iPad and recording to the SD cards on both of these cameras. And I'm really curious to see how the 4K footage looks, but I've seen the 1080p footage and it looks really good. Now, keep in mind, you're gonna need a pretty fast network for this. You're gonna need something like Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E. Wi-Fi 6E is more recommended. You're gonna have a less latency, you're gonna have less issues with it dropping connection. But one thing you could actually do if you wanted to hardwire these cameras is that you can actually plug in a USB to Ethernet adapter and then just hardwire them Ethernet, and then you know you're never gonna have any interruptions. But again, the whole purpose of these is to have a nice wireless, simple setup with no cables. Now, I think the best use cases for these cameras in like a professional scenario is using them at like a church or an event or a podcast or a setup like this where you have like an overhead camera, you're doing unboxings, or you can easily switch to the unboxings. Obviously I have the iPad in the way here. Normally you'd have that off somewhere or someone else controlling it to do all the camera switching. Now that I think about it, if you want to do like a multicam live stream at a concert and have like multiple camera operators roaming with these cameras, you could rig them up with a monitor. You wouldn't be able to control any of the settings. You'd have to have the main controller that's switching the cameras at the back do that for you based off what they're seeing. But you could theoretically rig these cameras up and have wireless cameras anywhere. Now, the other cool thing about this Mevo ecosystem is that Logitech does have those Mevo Start cameras, which they came out with a couple years ago. And you can add those into this as well, so you can have the entire ecosystem working. But what's also cool is if you have Mevo Pro, which is a subscription, you can actually connect your phone up to it as well. So we're gonna go in here, I'm gonna go continue. We've got the camera rolling in here now. And as you can see, it popped up, it says connect. Go to continue. And now it's gonna load in my iPhone. And so we can now switch to this. And now we have the iPhone angle. So if you needed to jump to something like, hey, look at this, I got this cool, this cool lens right here, like check this out. If you just needed to quickly grab another camera angle, you can do that with your phone. And that was so easy. It just literally loaded in. But again, you have to have Mevo Pro in order for this to work, because that is a subscription. Otherwise, you will not be able to add your phone to it. All in all, I think this is a pretty awesome solution if you need a way higher quality multicam live stream setup that's a little bit more professional without needing tons of extra equipment. Now, the fact that these come with the built-in batteries and Wi-Fi 6E for streaming, it's a huge recommendation for me if you're wondering what to get for a professional live streaming setup. You have full control over the cameras from the app, the ability to zoom lenses, which would be super handy if you had them mounted up high and you couldn't physically control them, especially when using power zoom lenses. Now, I was using the Olympus 14-42, but you can still use normal zoom lenses. You just have to physically zoom them. And obviously you don't need them to be fully wireless. You could hook them up through USB-C and run them continuously that way. Now, I demonstrated this whole video using an iPad because it's easier to kind of see what you're actually doing, but you can use your phone as well. I'm actually using a pretty old iPad. This is a 2018 iPad Pro, and it seems to be handling everything okay. The Mevo Core units are $9.99 and they're available right now. So if you're thinking about picking up something like this, you want to level up your multicam live streamings, I'll have links in the description where to get them. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike this video, give it a thumbs down twice. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one.